Okay, for those of you that were not here on April 6th, I am going to go through how to take notes while reading a passage, how to highlight important information while reading a passage, and how to use that in order to answer questions correctly for the PSSA tests that are coming up. We are going to use color blindness, which is the article we read for benchmark number 3. This was the second section of the benchmark test, the open-ended section. Okay, a lot of you did very well on the actual questions on Ed Insight, but I noticed that a lot of people were struggling on the second half of the benchmark, the part that was based on this article. So we're going to take a look at this together today. You should have the color blindness article in front of you. This is uploaded to eBackpack. I also have hard copies in my room that you can grab. Also, you should have your composition book out. You should be taking notes while viewing this video. I'm going to be using this Word document to record what you should have on your notes, so you can take notes in the composition book as I type it all out on the Word document. Also, you should have your questions from the third 9 weeks benchmark that I handed back to you. And this will have the correct answers on it, as well as your score on the TDA, the text-dependent analysis. Okay, so we did talk about the actual grading for the PSSA tests and for the benchmark test. With the actual questions here that you answered, each of these were worth 1 point. You'll notice that question number 2 said which 2 pieces of evidence support your answer to question number 1. So for this particular question, you were to choose 2 correct answers. Now during the PSSAs, you will encounter questions like this, and you will need to select both of the correct answers in order to get the 1 point for that question. So for example, if you get one question right, and one answer to the question wrong, you will not receive the point for that question. Now, I personally think that you should get credit for at least having one answer correct here, but on the PSSAs, unfortunately, you will not get points for the question if you only choose one of the correct answers. So we're going to take a look at that today. In terms of the TDA, the text-dependent analysis, or the written response section here, the score for this is going to be either a 1, 2, 3, or 4. 4 is the highest points value that you can get for the written response. And for the PSSAs, whatever you get for that score, either the 1, 2, 3, or 4, that will be times by 4 in order to get your actual score on the written response on the TDA. So that's how I graded this as well on the benchmark. So you'll notice that this section is worth a lot more points than the other section, and it's weighted a lot more heavily. So we're going to focus on strategies for answering this TDA in an appropriate way, in a way that will hopefully get you all 4 points. Okay, so now that you have your actual score on the benchmark, you can take a look at that. And you should have open your composition book, ready to take some notes. And you should have the color blindness passage in front of you as well. Okay, I would suggest having a highlighter ready, or a pencil or a pen, something you can use to mark this up. Now on the PSSAs, you are going to receive 2 items to complete that test. You are going to receive an answer booklet, which is where you actually record your answer, where you bubble in the correct answers, and you're also going to receive the testing booklet. The testing booklet is going to include all of the passages that you're going to need in order to answer the questions. Now, the answer booklet, you are not going to be able to actually write in or mark up, besides choosing the correct answers. The packet of all of the different articles, however, the testing booklet, you will be able to mark up with pens, pencils, highlighters, whatever it is that you have, and that's going to definitely help you when you go to answer those questions. So when you come for the PSSAs on Tuesday and Wednesday, you're going to want to make sure that you come with materials you might need in order to mark up those passages to help you pick things out easily. Okay, so I'm going to show you some strategies for using a highlighter and highlighting the most important information within a text. And this is going to help you prepare for the PSSAs. Okay, so taking a look at our article here and taking a look at our notes, the first thing we want to make a note of is you are going to want to read through the passage at least once before actually highlighting anything. This passage that we had here for the benchmark was pretty small. It's only one page. So in order to highlight the important information, you first have to know what the main theme is, the main idea of the article is, and you won't know that until you actually read it through. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this article. We'll read it through once here, and then we'll move on to actually highlighting the information. So follow along, and we're going to read our way through Color Blindness by John Roy Bonheur. Okay, so we have color blindness is the inability to distinguish between colors. It affects about 8% of all men and 0.5% of women. Most people with defective color vision have trouble distinguishing between red and green. They may not be able to see different shades of these colors, or they may see both of them as a shade of yellow. Complete color blindness, in which people see all colors as black, white, or gray, is much rarer. Color blindness is usually inherited and has nothing to do with the sharpness of vision. It is carried by a gene transmitted through the mother. Male children inherit the gene from their mother. Female children are not usually affected, but they pass the gene on to their own children. Acquired color blindness may be caused by certain eye diseases. Doctors test for color blindness by having a patient pick out patterns in colored dots or match pieces of various colors. Okay, so we read our passage first. That's going to be step 1. So we have that in our notes. Under that, we're going to have a step 2, and step 2 is going to be determine the main idea, or the main focus. What does the reader take away from the passage? What does the author want the reader to understand or to gain by reading this? Okay, so looking at this particular passage, I can see that there are 3 main things that this article is trying to do. The first thing it's trying to do is explain what color blindness is. It gives us a definition here. So it's trying to explain what color blindness actually is here. Okay, the second thing the article is doing here is telling us how people are colorblind, or how they become colorblind. Talks about how this gene is inherited and it's passed down through the mother. The final thing that the article is trying to do is it's trying to explain how people can determine if they are colorblind, or how someone can go about determining if someone has color blindness. So those are going to be the main focuses of this particular article. And now that I know that, I'm going to be able to highlight the important information. Things that have to do with those 3 terms that I just said. Determining what color blindness is, or defining it. Showing how someone becomes colorblind, which is having it inherited. And then the third thing is how others test people to see if they are colorblind or if they are not. So those are the 3 things we're going to focus on here. So in our notes here, the third thing we are going to do is we are going to highlight the important information. Okay, and that should be something that you're writing in your notes here. Okay, under highlight the important information, we are going to have some bullet points under here. We're going to have some specific things that we need to keep in mind whenever we are highlighting that important information in text. Okay, so let's take a look at this article, and I'll show you how exactly we're going to do this. So we're looking at the beginning here. It says color blindness is the inability to distinguish between colors. This is something that is important because this is the definition here. So under highlight the important information, a bullet point you're going to want to put here is always highlight definitions. Okay, when the article is presenting a definition of something, that's usually going to be important somewhere down the road. It's going to be telling you more information about either a specific person, idea, place, and these are things that you're going to want to know. So under highlight the important information in your notes, we should have the first bullet point here, definitions, highlighting definitions here. Okay, so let's keep reading our colorblind article here. It says it affects about 8% of all men and 0.5% of women. Okay, this is a fact. This is a statistic that's thrown in here. Basically what this is doing, and this is showing us that men have color blindness significantly more than women do. And this is something that we can just make a note of. We don't have to highlight this. If you were doing this for the PSSAs, you might want to write something in the margin here that says men, color blindness more, women, color blindness less, or something to that effect. Okay, but let's keep reading here. It says most people with defective color vision have trouble distinguishing between red and green. Okay, this is important. This goes along with our definition. Okay, so we're going to highlight here red and green. And we're going to do this because this helps us pull this out really quickly. Okay, so instead of highlighting a whole sentence here, we're only highlighting either a word or phrase so that that jumps out and we can see it quickly. So under our notes here, when we have highlight the important information, first we have definitions that we highlight, and then we're going to put words or phrases that are important. Okay, you'll notice that this stands out really quickly. Instead of highlighting all these irrelevant words here, most people with defective color vision have trouble. We don't need all of that. All we need to know is red and green are the two colors that we have trouble seeing if we are colorblind. So that's something I'm going to highlight. And you'll notice here, if I just read the highlighted sections, it says color blindness is the inability to distinguish between colors, red and green. Okay, so that's what we need here. We don't need to highlight all of these extra words. And I've been seeing in practices and also in the benchmark test that a lot of you are highlighting either entire sentences or whole paragraphs, and that's not necessarily something that you want to do. You want to highlight just words and phrases that will stand out and you can read them quickly and take the information away from the article quickly. Okay, if you highlight the whole sentence, when you go back to the article, you're going to have to read that whole sentence again, and what you're really looking for here is the colors red and green. Okay, so that's a good note to have, is that you should highlight just words or phrases instead of entire sentences or paragraphs. Right, so let's continue. It says they may not be able to see different shades of these colors. Okay, that's going along with red and green, so we don't need to highlight that. It says they may see both of them as a shade of yellow. Okay, that's like a side note as well, not something that we necessarily need to highlight. All right, then it says complete color blindness, in which people see colors as black, white, or gray, is much rarer. Okay, when I read this, I think to myself, is this important to the article as a whole? Is this something that the article is focusing on? And I can pretty much answer that question with no. It's not something that's necessary. This is kind of like another side note or additional information about complete color blindness, but that's not what the entire article is about. So that's something that I can disregard for now. Okay, continuing. Color blindness is usually inherited and has nothing to do with the sharpness of vision. Okay, this tells us about how someone can become colorblind or why someone is colorblind. So this is something that's important. So I'm going to highlight here the word inherited. Instead of highlighting this whole sentence, which is unnecessary, I just need that key word that the color blindness is inherited. That's how someone becomes colorblind. So you can see that I can pick that out easily. Okay. Then says it is a gene, or it is carried by a gene transmitted through the mother. Okay, this is important. Okay, this gene is transmitted through the mother. The mother is the one that's going to carry this. Okay, so that means if a male is colorblind and he has children, he's not going to pass that down to them. This is the mother that does this. Okay, so we highlighted that. Again, not the whole sentence, just the phrase that's going to help us understand the important information there. Okay, let's continue. It says male children inherit the gene from their mother. Well, that's basically what we just highlighted here. The gene is transmitted through the mother. So a note that I want you to put over here in your notes under highlight the important information, another bullet point we have here is, I want you to avoid highlighting redundant information. Avoid highlighting redundant information. Okay, a lot of times I see whenever you guys are highlighting, you highlight things multiple times, and it's basically just a rephrasing of the same idea, and that's really unnecessary. You don't need to highlight the same idea multiple times. As long as you have it once and you understand it and you know what it is, that is fine. That is enough. So we already have the genes transmitted through the mother. So I'm not also going to highlight male children inherit the gene from their mother, because that's basically the same thing, a rephrasing of that idea. Okay? All right, moving on. Female children are not usually affected, but they pass the gene on to their own children. Okay, we know they pass the gene on to their own children. Again, this is redundant, but we did not yet make a note of the fact that female are not usually affected. So we're going to highlight just those words there. Female, not usually affected. Okay, again, we're skipping this part here. The genes transmitted through the mother is basically the same idea on the second part of that sentence. So we're going to go ahead and skip that. Okay, then it says acquired color blindness may be caused by certain eye diseases. Well, do eye diseases really have anything to do with the article as a whole here? Does it have anything to do with the main idea? No, it doesn't. The rest of the article doesn't talk about any eye diseases, so we're going to go ahead and skip that as well. And then our final thing here says doctors test for color blindness by having a patient pick out patterns in colored dots or match pieces of various colors. Okay, that's something that we decided was important to the article, so we're going to go ahead and highlight this. So we can say that you can test for color blindness. Patient, pick out patterns in colored dots, match pieces of various colors. Okay, so those are going to be the things that we highlight here. All right, so looking at this as a whole, this is what an article should look like once you have highlighted the important information. You'll notice that I don't have sections of whole paragraphs that I completely highlighted through. You'll also notice I won't have whole sentences in here, or whole chunks of the passage highlighted, because that's not going to be helpful whenever you go back and you're trying to find information quickly. All right, so if we just look at the highlighted information here, that's going to give us a gist of the article. So we can read just the highlighted parts. And it says, color blindness is the inability to distinguish between colors red and green. It's inherited. The gene is transmitted through the mother. The female is not usually affected. To test for color blindness, you can have a patient pick out colored patterns, dots, match pieces of various colors. Okay, so that is perfect. That right there sums up our whole article. That's what we need. Okay, so that is our section on actually highlighting the passage here. Okay, so we're good on our notes based on that. So what we're going to do now is we are going to take a look at the actual benchmark questions here, and we're going to pretend like this is our PSSA. Okay, just so you know, you should be reading through this article more than once. You should be referencing back to this article more than once. I think some of you are trying to read it once, memorize the information. When you come to a question, you think to yourself, I don't really remember, but I think it might be this, and you choose an answer, okay? Look back. You have the answers. They're all right here in the passage. You can go back to it as many times as you want to. Okay, so make sure that you're doing that. You're going back to the article. You're referencing it. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the questions here from the benchmark, and we're going to logically reason through these together. So let's take a look at number 1 here. It says, according to the passage, who would most likely be colorblind? Okay, so we're looking back here. Who's most likely colorblind? Okay, so we have that the female's not usually affected. We know that usually it's just the male that is getting the color blindness and showing itself. So if we look over to question 1, a woman whose father is colorblind, we can automatically eliminate that choice there. We can't choose that because women are not the ones that are showing color blindness. They are carrying the gene here. So we can eliminate D right off the bat. Okay, so looking at A now, a man whose father is colorblind. Well, we know that the father is not the one that passes down the gene. The mother is the one that passes down the gene. So that's not going to be an answer. So we can eliminate both D and A right off of the bat here. Okay, let's take a look at B. A man who must wear thick glasses. Well, that's just ridiculous. That has nothing to do with anything that was in this article over here. So we are not going to choose that. And that leaves us with C, which must be our answer here. So we are going to double check ourselves and take a look here. A man whose mother's brothers are colorblind. Well, okay, a man whose mothers and brothers are colorblind. Okay, so the mother has siblings who are colorblind, which means she should be colorblind, but instead she's not. She's a carrier. So since she carries this gene, she can pass it down to her son, and that makes perfect sense. So C makes sense here, and that's going to be our answer for number 1. Okay, let's go ahead and move to number 2 here. Number 2 says, what 2 pieces of evidence support your answer to the question above? Okay, so our answer to the question above was a man whose mother's brothers are colorblind. So we're looking for things that support the fact that a mother that is part of a family with colorblind people is going to pass that gene down to her son. So let's take a look at our answer choices here and choose the ones that have to do with that. Okay, so again, we're choosing 2 pieces of evidence here. 2. Okay, so the first one here says male children inherit the gene from their mother. Well, that exactly goes along with the choice that we chose for number 1 here, so that's definitely going to be an answer. Okay, let's look at B. Female children are not usually affected, but they pass the gene on to their own children. Again, this goes exactly along with what we chose here for number 1, so that's going to be our second answer. So there we already have our 2 pieces of evidence. So let's just check and make sure the other ones don't make sense. Well, this one here is a statistic. That's not really proving our answer to number 1 here, so that wouldn't be a choice. This one here is talking about the sharpness of vision. That really doesn't have anything to do with our choice for number 1. And then this last one here is talking about eye diseases, and that really, again, has nothing to do with what we chose for number 1 here. So our 2 answers for number 2 are going to be A and B. And in order to get a point for this question on the PSSA, you would have to answer both A and B correctly. Okay. All right, this looks good. Let's move on to number 3 here. Number 3 says, what might a colorblind person have trouble doing? Okay, so let's take a look over back at our article. Colorblindness is the inability to distinguish between colors red and green. Okay, so someone who's colorblind would have trouble seeing the difference between the colors red and green. So now we're going back. We have to choose one of these things that has to do with red and green and distinguishing between them. So looking at choice number A, or choice letter A, excuse me, we have driving a car through an intersection with a traffic light. Well, in order to drive through an intersection with a traffic light, you would have to know if the traffic light was green for go or red for stop. So that's something that has to do with red and green. So I'm going to highlight that as an answer and just make sure the others don't make sense here. Okay, playing soccer. Do you need to know the difference between red and green during that sport? Probably not. Playing the piano? No. Reading a newspaper? Those are black and white, so I'm going to go ahead and say no, you wouldn't need that. So our answer here is going to be A. Okay. Good. Make sure you're checking these against your answers as well, because you have yours in front of you there. Okay, let's look at number 4. This one was tricky. A lot of people missed number 4 here. Okay, this one says the passage suggests that. Okay, well, what does this passage basically suggest here? Overall, we got a suggestion of how these genes are inherited, how they get passed down. The passage suggests that color blindness is the inability to distinguish between red and green. It's also suggesting that there are these 2 ways that we could test someone to see if they are colorblind. Those were the main points that we had in our passage. Okay, so let's look at our answer choices here. We have A, color blindness can be cured. Well, it doesn't mention anything about that in the article, so that's not going to be an answer here. B, color blindness is extremely rare. This is the choice that most of you chose for this number here, but this is not going to be the right answer. Okay, overall, the article does not talk about how rare it is. It doesn't keep referring back to that point. It does state that something is rare here, and I'll highlight this so you can see it here. Right here, it does say complete color blindness, in which people see colors as white, black, and gray, is much rarer. But we already said that this wasn't something that was important to the text as a whole. And also, this is not what the main article is about. So that's not going to be our choice for this question here. We're going to go ahead and skip that. That's not going to be our answer. Okay, so let's look what else we have here. More women are colorblind than men. Well, we know that the article says that the men are the ones that show the color blindness and the women don't. They're carriers, so that can't be the right answer. So the last one here is color blindness occurs every other generation. That is going to be our answer here. And we can look back and realize here that the females don't show color blindness. They pass it on. So the fact that they pass it on means it's going to show itself every other generation. You're going to have those that are colorblind, and then you have the female who's not. And then she'll pass it on. Her children will be colorblind, and then they'll pass it to the female, and she will not. So every other generation is going to show this color blindness, and that's going to be our answer for number 4 here. Okay? Questions on this, you can just ask me, or you can type those through eBackpack or Class Owl, and I will answer those for you. Okay, but those are going to be our answers to the actual questions. Now we're going to move on to the text-dependent analysis, the TDA, the written response. Okay, so I'm going to give you some techniques here for responding to the TDA for the benchmark and also for the PSSAs. Okay, so we're going to scoot this over here, and we're going to take some notes before we actually get started with answering our TDA here. So in your notes here, I'd like you to make a section that is titled Written Response. Oops. You could also call this the TDA, the Text-Dependent Analysis. Okay, so we're going to make a spot for this in our notes. You might want to underline this so you can see it easily. And these are going to be strategies we use for responding to the written response here. Okay, so we're going to have a few steps that we're going to take in order to answer the TDA. Right, so the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to we are going to determine what the question is asking. That's the most important thing here, is determine what the question is actually asking us. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the actual written response question here. Okay, it says color blindness is the inability to distinguish between colors. I'm going to tell you right now, on the PSSAs, whenever you get your written response section, they are going to throw a random statement at you, and that's what this is right here. This is a statement. It's not asking you anything. A lot of people, when you were working on your benchmark, you read this first part and you ran with it. You didn't even read the question. A lot of you started describing what color blindness is based on the passage there, and that's not what this is asking. So we need to make sure that we are determining what the actual question is and what the question is asking us. And we need to make sure we're not getting caught up in the random statements that are made right before it, because they're trying to trick you there with the PSSAs. They're going to throw some statements at you and hope that you run with that and that you start writing a response based on that. And that's not what you want to do. So you want to really determine what the question is asking here. So we can look at what the question is really asking, and it really says, how would you determine if a person were colorblind? That's the question. And it also says include at least 2 details from the passage to support your answer. Okay, so a lot of you did not go back to the passage and list those two details. That's really important that you do that. Even if the passage is not asking you, even if the question's not asking you to go back to the passage and pull details, you still want to do that when you're responding to a TDA. That's a good practice. Okay, so we have our question. We know what this is. That's step 1. We need to tell the reader how someone could determine if someone was colorblind. Okay, so that's our question here. That's the first thing we do. The second thing we're going to do, and you should be writing this in your notes here, is you are going to reword the question as a statement. Okay, this is important. This sets up your paper. Okay, this also gives you a guideline. It helps you know exactly what you're going to be doing here. So in order to do this, we're going to take a look at our question. How would you determine if a person were colorblind? We need to turn this into a statement. So you could say, you could determine if someone, or we could even put, you could determine if a person was colorblind by using a few different methods. Okay, I'm just making a statement here, and that's what you want to do. You want to set up your whole written response with a topic sentence, and you do that by rephrasing the question in the form of a statement. Okay, so that's what we did first. So back to our notes. The third thing we want to do here is we want to reference the passage. We want to pull either, this is going to be a quote or a paraphrase. Either one is going to work just fine here. So we're going to set our notes apart. We're going to take a look at our passage. It says include at least 2 details from the passage to support your answer. So I need to include 2 things from this passage in my written response. Okay, so let's take a look. What's important here? Well, those that are colorblind can't really distinguish between red and green. So that's important here. So I'm going to reference that in my written response here. So I can say something like, in the passage, the author explains, and then I can go into my quote here, and I can just pull this right here. It says, most people with defective color vision have trouble distinguishing between red and green. Okay, I'm making a statement. I'm taking a quote from the text. Okay, that's good. So first I have my quote. So I did that. I referenced the passage. I had a quote or paraphrase. The next thing you want to do after you do that is you want to add your own, thoughts to the response. Okay, so I need to add something to this here. So I could say something like, based on that fact, you could have someone sort cards that were red and green into piles to determine if they could tell the difference between the colors. Okay, this might be something I might write here. Okay, so you will notice that I'm making a comment on the quote. I am adding to it. Okay, so that's what you want to go about doing here. So we need to do this 2 times. So I did this once. If I was actually writing this out and doing my TDA, I would then go back and say, okay, what else could I use here? I could say something about checking to see if the mother had anyone in her family that had color blindness, because that was something that was mentioned here. Okay, so I might go about saying, okay, based on the text, I learned that the female is not affected, but she passes the gene down. So based on that, I could ask this person if their mother had anyone in the family that had color blindness, because that would tell me that it was passed down through the family or something like that. Okay, so you want to make sure that you do another detail from the text and you comment it on again. Okay, so I'm going to let you do that part by yourself, but there should be another quote and personal comment. Okay, and then finally, the last thing that you're going to want to do whenever you're doing your text-dependent analysis here, number 5 in our notes, is going to be create a concluding sentence. You want to wrap this up. You don't want to leave the reader hanging with a comment. You want to actually let the reader know that you are wrapping up your passage and you're wrapping up what you're saying. Okay, so an example of this, if I was doing my concluding sentence here after having this quote and personal comment, I could say something like, these are two of many ways to determine if someone is colorblind. Okay, and that would be my concluding sentence, wrapping that up here. All right, so based on this model, you should determine what the question is asking, which we did. We took away that random statement. We disregarded that. You should reword the question as a statement, which we did at the very beginning. That's going to create a topic sentence for us. It's going to set us on the right direction when we're writing. You're going to want to reference the passage using quotes or paraphrases. Okay, so we did that. You're going to want to add your own thoughts to the response, which we did. Based on that fact, you could have someone sort cards that were red and green into piles to determine if they could tell the difference between the colors. Okay. And then finally, that you're going to need that concluding sentence. So we have an example here. These are two of the many ways to determine if someone is colorblind. You're just letting the reader know that you're now done and you have concluded your TDA. Okay. So this is what we basically went over in class. For those of you that missed, we went through all of this together. Okay, so you'll notice on eBackpack you have a homework assignment. And that homework assignment is, I'll write this here so that you can take a look at it. Your homework assignment from the other day here is to rewrite your response to the TDA. Okay, this is the written response. And this is also based on the article Color Blindness. Okay, so that's the first thing that you want to do here is rewrite your response to color blindness. So you're going to take a look at what you had for this, and then you're going to rewrite it based on these steps that we did. So you're going to go through and you're going to determine what the question is asking. You're going to reword the question as the form of a statement for a topic sentence. You're going to reference the passage twice using quotes and paraphrases. You're going to add your own thoughts to these, and you're going to have a concluding sentence, okay? So everyone is rewriting their TDA from the benchmark as a practice for the PSSAs, okay? So you must do that. The second thing you're going to do for homework is you're going to write a paragraph explaining why and how your second response is more effective than your first response. Okay, so I really want you to think about how you did on the first one and then how you have improved on that. So how have you added to your written response? How have you enhanced that? How have you made it more effective? That's what you're going to do with your second paragraph. So your first one is going to be your rewrite of the TDA. Your second homework paragraph is going to be you explaining how and why your second response is more effective or more elaborate than the first one that you wrote. Okay, so both of these paragraphs can be uploaded to eBackpack. You can go to eBackpack and there you will find this passage, you'll find the question, and you'll find a white piece of paper in there that you can type up those two paragraphs on and submit that through eBackpack. Okay, so those are the two things you need to do for homework, and this is everything that we did in class. I hope this was helpful for you. And I will review what you write on eBackpack, and I will send you notes, written response for that, okay?